I remember in 2014 when I was in São Paulo, and I was talking to, I think, about 4 friends separately who used to work in Asia. And I asked all 4 of them, what do you miss the most about Asia? The answer was very consistent.
Coffee.
Bubble tea.
Really?
Yeah.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Impulso podcast by Momentum Works. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Brazil. We have a special guest joining us. We have Carl. So Carl writes a lot of the articles for us on the Lowdown blog, which is why we've invited him today to share a little bit of his perspectives on today's topic, which is Brazil and why everyone is going to Brazil, right? So TikTok Shop recently launched in Brazil this month, May. And earlier this year, Didi, which is one of the largest ride-hailing company in China, who has been operating in Brazil as well, recently re-entered food delivery in Brazil. So they were there previously, and then it didn't really work out for them. They exited.
They exited food delivery, but they kept the fleet. The fleet became interesting. I think internally they mentioned they have like 700,000 riders or something. So two-wheelers, they have been using that for mobility, and now it's just a workforce ready if they want to do food delivery.
If you guys are interested, we did a more in-depth podcast on that. That will be linked in the show notes below. One of the points we mentioned during the podcast with TT actually was that the reason why they were sort of re-entering food delivery in Brazil during this time was kind of to stay ahead of Meituan,
which is another Chinese company.
Yes, which is the largest food delivery company in China.
Yeah.
That has been expanding pretty rapidly overseas.
They're expanding to UAE, Kuwait, and the other GCC countries, but Brazil is new.
They also announced recently that they are going to be entering Brazil.
Yeah.
And they pledged to invest about, I think about $1 billion. And then of course, the very big bubble tea store, Mixue, who is the largest F&B chain in the world by a number of stores, also announced that they would be opening in Brazil. And not just opening stores in Brazil, but they're actually planning to open some factories there as well, right?
Yes, and of course, Brazil is it the largest coffee producer in the world? And Chinese players buy a lot of coffee from Brazil. Luckin did a huge pledge to buy. I think they were meeting the vice president of Brazil in China last year. The funny thing is that I used to work a lot with Brazilians. And I remember in 2014 when I was in São Paulo, and I was talking to, I think, about 4 friends separately who used to work in Asia. And I asked all 4 of them, what do you miss the most about Asia? The answer was very consistent.
Coffee.
Bubble tea.
Really?
Yeah.
So I think then that's the question, right? So why is everyone, or why are all these Chinese companies going to Brazil now?
Yeah, Carl, what do you think?
So I think that's due to the very friendly political environment, because Brazil is very friendly to China for a long time since the election of Lula as president. Lula is also very friendly to China, and a lot of Chinese people, they love Lula because Lula's roots as a worker. Yeah.
Roots as a worker?
Yeah. Because Lula was born in a very poor family.
Okay.
And Lula even lose his finger among working.
So people like his story as somebody who came from a
Yes.
poor background and fought his way up, right? Rather than someone who is like born in privilege and stuff, right?
Yeah, people love underdogs.
People love underdogs, yes. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, they have a good relationship. And then Lula also recently went to China, right? So
Yes.
this was his 4th visit to China. It was in May
It's just a couple of days ago, and I was in Beijing at the same
at
time.
the same time.
No, I was asking the executives of some of these companies saying that, hey, why is everyone going to Brazil now? And one answer I kept getting is that we have good relations. We have good relations, as Carl said, right? Because you know, internationally, there's quite a bit of backlash against, quite a bit of suspicion against many of the Chinese giants. And if you look at Meituan trajectory going to Saudi Arabia, going to Brazil, these are the countries which are friendly.
So there's a much more friendly business environment for them to work, which I guess makes it easier as well. And I think because a lot of this is because of better political relationships, right? So for example, when Lula was in China recently, I think they had a ceremony where they signed a lot of MOUs and like agreements amongst companies. So there's this photo that's very cute. This is after they signed the
Yeah,
MOU.
I think the MOUs are still on the desk.
But then also on the desk, you can see there's the little like Mixue Luckin mascot.
Yeah.
And then there's also this is the Meituan kangaroo.
So the information we have is that, okay, their plan is to expand into the other part of GCC from Saudi Arabia, and
Yes.
then gradually move to other markets. So Brazil was accelerated. I think this visit from Lula and the potential of signing a deal and a lot of sort of talkings in the back end probably contributed largely to this decision.
And it's not just political relationship, right? So I think there's this very interesting chart from the Economist
Yeah.
where they kind of show like the perception of the citizens from these Latin America countries of China. And it's actually quite interesting because most of them actually have a pretty good perception.
I was actually quite kind of shocked to look at this. I mean, also this is kind of understandable, right? If you look at this, so which country do you believe China, US respect Latin American countries? And that was the question asked, right? I think there's something happening with Colombia, right? Because when Trump first came into office, he kind of forced Colombia to take over some prisoners or something, and there was a big incident, and which made the Colombians very unhappy. Venezuela, I mean, we all know what's happening in Venezuela. So Brazil, Argentina, I mean, you see this consistency, right? I mean, people in South America generally think that China respects them more. And of course, I would expect this to be mutual, right?
And I think, of course, this also makes it easier for businesses going into Latin American countries, right? Because obviously, if the people have more respect for you or they have a preference for you, they would be more willing to use your services and product as well.
Yeah, it was also interesting. I think Carl, you went with me to these meetings with Brazilian and Mexican executives there about 2 months ago.
Right.
Yeah. So you can see that the Brazilian executives are much more friendly towards Chinese companies compared to the Mexicans.
I mean, like Mexicans, maybe they are like very closer to the US, so they have a deeper like cooperation with the US. And for Brazil, I think because US feel a bit detached, so they think like China is like one of their members, comrades in the global south, but Mexicans do not feel so. Yeah.
Brazil is literally in the south. Yeah.
I guess it also helps that now they've kind of extended like visa-free travel from China to Brazil. So that also makes it a lot easier for Chinese businesses to go there.
It's much easier because since like a year ago, there are lots of Chinese business people asking us, hey, can we organize immersion to Brazil? We're a bit overstretched. So of course, one concern for people to not be able to commit very quickly is the visa requirements, right? You need to plan well ahead. Yeah.
Visa is a very big problem when traveling. I have realized that. So that's what we talk about, like China and Brazil having a good relation now. I would say they've had a pretty good relationship for quite a while, right? I mean, they trade a lot with each other. So
yes,
I think China is one of the top.
It is the top.
It is the top
Export
destinations for quite a lot of Latin American countries. So, for example, in the chart here,
Brazil exports like 30% of their total.
do they export to China?
Okay. So generally, they export a lot of things like agricultural products to China.
Soybeans.
China faces a lot of tariffs from US on things like soybeans and corn. And also, they will export something like minerals, which are pretty like required by Chinese manufacturers. Yeah.
So a lot of raw materials and ingredients,
yes.
like agricultural products.
Yes. You make lots of tofu in China.
You need soybean to make tofu. What do you need to make tofu?
No, yeah. I mean, soybeans is super important, and of course you have tofu, your soy sauce, which are integral to Chinese cuisine. But more importantly, is feed, right? It's feed to all the animal stocks. I think if you look at trade, right? I mean, before 2000, and the trade between Brazil and China, even before like 2002, right? It was barely like $2-3 billion, and fast forward to 2025, it's already like more than $100 billion. Just Brazil's export to China, and China exports to Brazil. I think lots of like electronic equipment, etc. It's actually a smaller scale. So Brazil runs large trade surplus towards China, and also China buys jets from Brazil.
Commercial jets, right?
Commercial jets, yeah.
What's the name of the
Embraer?
That we did not know this beforehand.
Yeah.
But then how would we know what commercial
All
jet?
remember like Boeing and Airbus, but we don't know.
That's the third largest player. I'm not sure you have flown on a
I've flown on a
ERJ jet, like a small regional jet.
what airlines use it?
Airline
that would-
Scoot.
Oh, Scoot uses
Scoot
it.
has some-
Definitely flew on it.
Scoot is the low cost subsidiary of Singapore Airlines. Yeah, Sabrina only flies Singapore Airlines.
Oh.
No, I fly other airlines. I fly Scoot.
Yeah, which is also part of the Singapore Airlines. And I think recently there are lots of cars, right? I mean, many of the Chinese car manufacturers are going to Brazil, and amazingly there is no backlash. Why?
For Chinese cars. Was there no backlash when... I do think there's a lot of backlash when China was... I do think there's a lot of backlash when China is trying to export their cars to like maybe the US or Europe, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yes.
essentially like safety concerns.
Is
and
that really
all
safety concerns?
No, that's what people say.
Yeah.
Like, but safety concern is just a good like excuse to use. You know, anything can be a safety concern.
I think the issue for Brazil is that Brazil has a lot of car manufacturing plants, right? But it doesn't have like a very strong domestic car brand. Historically, it was American brands, European brands, and Korean brands going to Brazil, right? In a sense, they don't really have a local brand, local champion to protect. And the market needs cars. I mean, whoever who can come with the better cars, whoever who can come and provide employment to all these manufacturing workers, I think they are welcome. So Brazil is a large market. I think whichever Chinese player who wants to go there will probably make some concession and start manufacturing there.
And of course, like we know there are a lot of Chinese car brands now, right? A lot of their own homegrown brands. A lot of them are EVs. And it's quite cute because so when Lula was in China recently, there was actually a video of him
visiting a car factory. Great Wall Motor, yeah.
So they kind of just brought him around to like see the car.
Yes.
Also, side note, I want to say that I think Chinese cars are like hella decked out. And I would love a Chinese car. Like they have everything. Like look at the fridge on this car. How many bottles of waters you can fit there? Or like food.
I think I can recognize the brand of this water. Yeah, but anyway, so
it's the most popular brand in China, right? The red color packaging.
He also played this video of when Lula got to the driving seat. The first thing he tried to is to swear because, and that made the general manager of this company like laugh, right? And
the first thing he did, he went into the car and he just like.
I was looking at this video being published on social media in China, and most of the comments are trying to guess the accent of the boss of this car company, saying, "Hey, which town is he from? Which province and stuff."
Yeah,
I mean, it's generally like an interesting, sort of friendly, sort of banter. Yeah.
But like, yeah, so we were looking through Douyin earlier, and there were actually a lot of remakes of this video. Like, of him just swerving the car around, right? So that's like just people editing. So I guess it shows that the Chinese public also does have a pretty positive perception of Brazil and like Lula as a president.
Yeah. So I think maybe that because of like Lula's praise on Chinese football watcher during his spare time. And at first, as a football watcher, I feel quite dubious. Like why he watch Chinese football when he is
Like,
from the kingdom of football, Brazil. Oh my goodness.
In a way, it touches a topic in an interesting way, right? Because first, there are lots of football fans in China, and second, everyone hates the way the football is played out in China because
how many Chinese people watch Chinese football?
a lot.
Yes.
A lot. They generally feel disappointed about the performance of Chinese football team, and they hope that the team would perform better. So having someone from Brazil, which is of course the traditional stronghold for football, saying that, hey, I care about your football as well, I think that sends a strong resonating message to the audience in China.
Obviously, we can see that China and Brazil have a really good relationship now, right? And of course, this means a lot of Chinese businesses are kind of looking at Brazil as another market that they can enter that's a lot more business friendly for them. Of course, with like the visa and of course better, I guess, having a better perception in the Brazilian people's mind. How do you think these dynamics will evolve?
I think all these companies go to Brazil. I spoke with some friends who have been with a large Chinese tech companies working in Brazil in the past. And they were saying that generally it takes like some time for you to figure out the rhythm to work together. But when the mutual perception is positive, it's much easier for you to get over differences and try to find a way to work together. Also hope that kind of goodwill can carry forward. And also, I think all these companies now, they have learned from the lessons of previous generation of companies going out, right? I mean, now they're much more respectful to basically a different environment and
the different
culture and try to find a way to work together. I mean, keeping the strong core, which is tech, data, etc. from China, but try to work out, how to work well with the local managers, local team, and local ecosystem. Let's see how that goes. I think globally, we see the dynamics are shifting, right? The BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Yes.
They seem to bond better together now with Trump in office. There's some shift in global dynamics. And of course, the BRICS, the 5 countries, plus all these like new members they adopt, that they have a very different systems. They have a very different cultures.
Yes.
But I think there are some real political calculations which hold them together, and which also translate into how the message they send domestically and the mutual perception, the respect that we talked about in this podcast. So from our point of view, I think it's interesting to see how the Chinese companies, these large companies, will perform in a country which is in the global south, whose institutions are more Western, right? I mean, and who are like large middle income, etc., etc. So I think it'll be interesting to see in the next few years, and certainly we'll hope that people can see some opportunities created by this wave of cooperation.
So thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Impulso podcast. We hope that you guys enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, do like this video as well as subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on the latest happenings and trends in tech, new retail, and the broader digital economy. Thank you and bye-bye.
Muito obrigado.
Bye bye.